Let's talk about the final project. So here we are, we're in week 7, and we're winding down the course. And what I want you to do here is basically take what you've learned and apply it independently to your own original research question. And so in all the other assignments we've ever done, I've given you the research question. I may or may not have explained which analysis to use. Earlier we did, and then in the most recent assignment you kind of to figure out which analysis to use, which type of test, and why. And so in this case you're going to create your own research question, your own justification for that, and then figure out which analysis to use, run that analysis, and then interpret it. So you want to demonstrate some level of independence in using the techniques we've learned in the class. So there's a number of files that I've attached here. We have final project template, student survey key, student survey short form .save, that's an SPSS file, and then an example PowerPoint. So you're going to run your analysis and present your findings in a PowerPoint format. So what's going on here in the data set is we have data on about 2,000 different high school kids. And we have data collected on their gender, their grade, birthday, where they were born, a whole bunch of different psychological and academic variables. And if you look here, we've got a pretty large data set. There are 1,833 participants in the data set. And this file right here, student survey key, this is it. This tells you what the different variables mean and how they're coded. So sex is coded, 1 is male, 0 is female. The grades are just 9, 10, 11, 12, so they're high school kids. The birthday is pretty self-explanatory. Then we get to some of these. So U.S. birth, basically if they have a 1, that means they were born in the U.S. A 0 means they were born in a foreign country. So this first kid was born in a foreign country. Most of these in the U.S., foreign, 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 U.S., and so forth. Special education, this means they're in a special education class. 0 is no, 1 is yes. The next one is primary language. So 1 means that their primary language is English. 2 is Spanish. So it's a lot of, I think I've got them in that order for some reason. 2 is Spanish. And then 3 is some other language other than English or Spanish. Then down here we have English, which is an English test, state test score from last year. So you'll find this for all the grades except 9th grade because they were in a different school last year, because they test at the end of the year. Same thing for math. And then we have a lot of these psychological variables. So these are composite scores. So basically it was a survey with, say, in this case, there's 5 items, and then the value you see here is a composite score. It's a standardized composite score showing you how they compare to the other kids on that variable. So this first variable is safety. I feel safe at this school. I am safe to and from school. There is adequate supervision during school. There is adequate supervision before and after school. I am not worried about being ridiculed or bullied at school. Right? So right here, safety, that's the response, that's the reaction to this variable. So if we go over here to safety, these are standardized scores. So there's z-scores. So this person's close to 0. This person feels safe at school at an average level. This person, -2, they feel, compared to the other students, they feel unsafe at school. And if you have a positive number, let's see if we can find a positive one, 1.8, this person feels especially safe. This person right here, -3.89, that's a really, really low score. So this person feels extremely, extremely unsafe at school compared to the other students. Okay, see how that works? And these are similar. So peers, how well they feel like they fit in with their peers and how they get along with their friends. Same thing with the staff. So you can read these yourself. I won't read them all to you on the video. But all these are different, basically composite survey responses. And then what I did is we have the same variables. So the first one of these was safety. We have the same variables as nominal level variables. So notice that all of these are scale. Okay. The English and the English scores, these are in the original standard scaled units. All the rest of these are in z-scores. They're standardized units. So it tells you how they compare to the other students. All the way down here. These are the same variables from, there you go, from here to here. These are the exact same variables. Instead of scale level, they're nominal level. So what I've done is I've grouped them low, medium, and high. So if the kid has a 1, Let's go over here. So the N means nominal. So if they have a 1, this person here, they are on the low end. They feel less safe. 2 is in the middle range, an average level of safety, and the 3 is the high end. They feel more safe. So it should correspond to right here, -4. That corresponded with 1, right? So they feel on the less safe side. So why did I do this? Why did I give you the same variables in 2 different formats? Well, it depends. This gives you options on which analysis you want to run and how you want to set it up. So let's take a look at this. Pull this up on the screen real quick. So the type of variable you're dealing with, the number of groups, and whether it's scale or nominal, will determine which statistical test you're going to use. And so these are basically the 4 tests we learned in the class: t-test, ANOVA, correlation, and a simple linear regression. And so when you're going to run a t-test, you have your independent variable is nominal, and it has 2 groups, only 2 groups. That's called dichotomous. The dependent variable is scale. If there's an ANOVA, for an ANOVA, that means there's more than 2 groups, nominal groups. Dependent variable is scale. A correlation has a scale independent variable and a scale dependent variable, as does regression. So correlation and regression really mathematically do the same thing, but regression puts it into sort of a predictive environment. It indicates that you're trying to predict one from the other, or maybe suggest more of a causal relationship. So that being said, your dependent variable needs to be, wouldn't be birthday, it's got to be one of these, right? So one of these has to be your dependent variable because those are the only scale. Your independent variable can be technically, I guess it could be sex, it could be grade, and it could be really any of these, right? So lots of options for independent variable. So you have to figure out what your research question is, what the levels of the variable are, and how many levels if it's nominal, and then pick out the test you're going to use based on that. So here's the template for what the final project should look like. You should have a title page, a research question in the form of a question, hypotheses, so you'll state these in formal terms with a known alternate hypothesis, descriptive statistics, so this is mean, standard deviations, the way the distributions look, showing histograms and things like that. Statistical method, you just say, I'm going to use a t-test because I am comparing 2 groups on some continuous outcome measure, or whatever it is. Output interpretation, so you're going to put the output and then annotate it and explain what those tables mean. Same thing here, you might have more than one, so you might need more slides. The results, so you're going to report the results using the APA convention that we learned in class. Make sure you have that written right, the statistic, the p-value, all that stuff. And then finally in the conclusion or the discussion, interpret your results and give us some implications. So why does this matter, right? Why did you bother to do this study, and what do the results mean? Okay. So you have a lot of combinations you can work with. So be creative, think about it, create a theory for your study, and then go ahead and run that. There's also an example of someone else's work. Let's take a look at that. So this is one that somebody else did in an earlier class. Their name wasn't just student, I changed it so it would be confidential. So in this case, they asked, does a student's primary language affect that student's standardized English test scores? So notice that it's written as a question, and then they explain why it was important. Their implications. Hypotheses, they use the formal convention. You might have to cut and paste from Word if you can't get it to pop up like this in Excel. PowerPoint, not Excel. Your descriptives, selection, look how they annotated. They put the table and they annotated it. They drew arrows and put circles. They gave the results, see how they used the proper convention, right? The F statistic, degrees of freedom, so forth. And then they gave their conclusion. So you can look back at this. Don't copy it exactly, but it does give you an idea of what I'm looking for. So you can do well on that. Anyway, hope that is helpful. This is due on day 4 of week 8, not day 5, not day 6. I have to score these as quickly as possible. So the sooner the better. Get those into me, and if you have any questions, let me know.